Mino is a single mother. After a short and traumatic marriage, she gradually lost faith in love and new relationships. She chose to live cautiously, freely, and focus entirely on her work.
何?
すいません。
But a chance encounter on that train became the beginning of a story she herself never expected. Sometime later, Mino was transferred to the company's headquarters. For Mino, nothing about it felt traumatic. Just another adjustment in the life of someone who had already learned to adapt. She entered with the quiet determination of someone who had learned that competence was the safest form of protection. The sounds of keyboards, phones, and conversations filled the air. A busy place, full of movement and energy. And then something unexpected happened. Across the office, someone turned around. For a brief second, their eyes met. And time did something strange. Recognition appeared before understanding. It took her mind a moment to catch up with what her eyes had already realized. The man is sitting at his desk, reviewing a stack of documents, was the same stranger from the train. Chris. The memory returned instantly, the awkward glances. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Chris seemed surprised, but his reaction was softer than hers. A quiet curiosity crossed his face, followed by a polite nod. Coincidences can be unsettling. When someone you assumed you would never see again appears in the middle of your everyday life, was it really a coincidence? Before Mino could fully understand the situation, Chris approached her with a friendly smile and a brief explanation of her new duties. Chris would be guiding her during her first few weeks. He would help her understand the department's workflow. He would introduce her to the clients. He would answer her questions whenever she needed support. For a brief moment, Mino felt the quiet resistance inside her rise again. Not because Chris had done anything wrong, but because her mind had already formed an opinion about him. And opinions once created rarely disappear quickly. Still, professionalism demanded cooperation, so she nodded politely. Chris greeted her with the calm, friendly tone of someone accustomed to working with new colleagues. There was nothing awkward in his voice. No trace of the strange tension she remembered from the train. In fact, if anything, he seemed almost reassuring. Over the next few days, what she noticed surprised her.
はい、お疲れ様。切りのいいところで帰っていいからね。あとは俺が巻き取るから。
ありがとうございます。
Chris worked with steady focus. He explained procedures patiently. There was no hint of arrogance. No subtle attempt to show superiority. And perhaps most surprising of all, he never once mentioned their earlier encounter on the train. It was as if that moment had never existed. Why would someone do that? Was he simply polite? Or had he noticed her discomfort back then and decided to spare her the embarrassment of revisiting it? These small uncertainties lingered in Mino's thoughts. At first, she maintained the same careful distance she always used in new environments. Conversations stayed brief and professional. Gratitude was expressed politely, but without warmth. It was easier that way. Safer. But Chris continued to behave the same way he had from the beginning, calm, respectful, quietly supportive. None of it felt forced. none of it seemed designed to impress her. He simply did what good colleagues often do, without expecting recognition. And slowly, something inside Mino began to shift. Not dramatically, just a small change in perception. The human mind has a curious habit. When reality refuses to match our assumptions, we face a quiet internal conflict. Do we hold on to our first impression, or do we allow ourselves to reconsider it? That question followed Mino. Every time Chris offered practical advice, every time a coworker praised his reliability, every time she noticed the way people naturally trusted his judgment during discussions, the image she had created on that train began to feel less certain. Had she misunderstood him? Or had she simply seen a moment without understanding the person behind it? Mino didn't have answers yet, but the quiet wall she had built around her perceptions had begun to crack, just a little. And sometimes, that small crack is where understanding first begins to enter. Being a single mother had already forced her to rebuild her life once. Her career was not just a job, it was stability. It was security. It was the quiet promise that she could stand on her own. After everything she had been through, independence had become a habit, a protective one. But something about Chris's quiet presence made the moment feel different. The tension that had been building inside Mino began to dissolve. Then she looked at Chris. And for the first time since that train ride, she allowed herself to see him without the filter of that earlier impression. What she noticed surprised her. There was patience in the way he listened. There was steadiness in the way he worked. And perhaps most importantly, there was no trace of the awkward stranger she thought she had encountered that day. Instead, there was simply a colleague, a thoughtful one, a reliable one. And suddenly, the memory of the train felt strangely distant. Mino felt something shift inside her, not embarrassment, not guilt, just a gentle awareness. She had been protecting herself for so long that her mind had learned to assume the worst before the truth had a chance to appear, and perhaps that instinct had once been necessary. But now, sitting beside someone who had shown nothing but patience and respect, she began to wonder something new. What if not every unfamiliar person carried hidden danger? What if some people simply needed time before their true character became visible? The office continued its usual rhythm around her, but inside her mind, something quieter had begun. The realization that the story she once told herself about Chris had never truly belonged to him. It had belonged to her first impression. And now, that impression was slowly giving way to something else. Understanding. The distance between them gradually disappeared. Over time, they were more than just colleagues. They became true friends. Sometimes, a relationship doesn't begin with romance. It begins with a small misunderstanding and gradually transforms into a very genuine connection.
ねえ、隼人何食べたい？
お腹すいた？
お腹すいたよね。
あ、外だから食べよっか。
あ、優しい。お兄ちゃんが今日は何でも食べさせてくれるって。
うん、何でも食べていいから。
ハンバーグが好きなの。
あ、じゃあ一緒にハンバーグ食べよう。